And of course, we have a guest this month, and this guest also has happened to have released a game. So, Lachlan, would you like to just go over what you have made and what you can do in it?
So, I've made a new game. Brace for the title. My mad scientist roommate turned me into her personal robotic battle maiden, which is a long title. But in the age of visibility on Steam, you need something catchy that quickly summarizes your plot going on. So yeah, I'm leaning into the whole light novel giant title trend, and it actually has worked. It's got a lot more visibility than my previous RPG. So I will be giving this a go for the short-term future. Um, yeah, so basically, I made a game a couple of years ago called A Lunar and Brie. It took all of the visual novel elements of my previous games, and I tried to make essentially a Persona style game. Not so much the themes of self-discovery and all of that, which are great and all, but I really like the time management and the social aspects of having friends you could hang out with and things like that, more so than the deeper personal revelations. So what my game is essentially your just a guy whose roommate is a mad scientist. You use her toothbrush by mistake, and she takes revenge by transforming you into a robotic battle maid girl who has to wear maid outfits and do what she says, leaning a little bit into that BDSM thing, trying to get some more audience into the games. Yeah, and then you get sucked into a fantasy adventure in my ongoing universe. So you have to juggle exploring this fantasy world and interacting with characters and shopping, and while completing a dungeon against a time limit. It's a turn-based JRPG. There's 4 party members. I've got some voice acting. I worked with some Australian voice actors. Amy Smith, who I've worked with before, she's really prolific in the indie game scene, particularly with Australian games. I got Rhiannon Michelle, who did a couple of the Age of Darkness games, the Age of Darkness game. She's a great voice actor. And then Alana Fitzgerald, who's done some indie stuff as well. All Australians, just trying to get more of that Aussie flavour in. And yeah, it's out now on Steam. I've released the first chapter, and I'm currently working on released the first 2 chapters. I'm currently working on the 3rd chapter. Aim to release that in the next couple of weeks, and hopefully the game will be done in a few months. Yeah, and so far it's been received really positively, which is great.
And you taught yourself coding to make this
Oh
one work,
yeah, this
didn't
is
you?
a long running one. So my previous game, Luna and Brie, I hired a company based out of Pakistan called Frag Games. I had attempted to make an RPG myself in Unreal Engine, and the whole thing crashed and burned. So I hired this programming team, and the first engineer they assigned to it, Agar Moran, he was fantastic. He set up combat, he set up dialogue, and I was like, great, this is going well, this is money well spent. But then he went on extended annual leave, and the 2 engineers they hired to replace him, I think, are about as experienced as I was. So the source code kind of fell apart. There were many things that were baffling. Like it's a PC game and you can't use the mouse because of glitches they couldn't figure out, which I'm still working around. So after Luna and Brie came out and it had a lot of bugs I wasn't happy with, it was a bit unpolished, the controls were a bit finicky. I was still proud of the story and the overall gameplay, but the balance was off and it haunted me for years. So I basically opened up their engine, I duplicated it, and I just started making a new game with it. And after close to 3 years of me jumping in and out of this engine, I finally got something I'm proud of. But learning Unreal Engine is one thing, but learning someone else's code and how it all interacts with each other, it was many, many, many days just to fix one minor bug and then to go, oh, so this is how this works. And yeah, I mean, they got a game
It
working.
sounds utterly horrific. I'm not going to lie. I
Oh,
don't
it
know how you've done
was.
that.
I don't know either. And halfway through, my computer broke and I couldn't produce anything in Unreal Engine, so I had to So what I did, which actually worked out great, was I took all of the characters I had made for this game, and then I rewrote a planned plot for Max's Big Bus 2, and I released that instead. And then instead of fixing my computer, I finished up Max's Big Bus 2, used all the money on that, and then I used the profits from Max's Big Bus 2 to get a beefy enough computer to debug the game. So it's honestly a miracle the game released, but I'm thrilled to have finally had a positive experience out of all of this, which is great. Just took 2 games to do it.
I'm genuinely
The
very
indie
impressed.
Oh, yeah,
That is insane. Well done.
thanks. I got there in the end.
But yeah,
God.
you've got a great game. It is a lot of fun, and it's one of those kind of indie RPGs that I think people that get into or that kind of discover it will find they really enjoy it. It's got really good sense of humor, as all your games do, and
100% positive reviews on Steam. Only
which is
11,
good.
but still.
It's
People will find it a lot.
it's a word of
That
mouth
is
thing,
11 people
right?
who have chosen to take time to write for you, though. So that's a pretty good sign, regardless of
Oh,
how many
yeah.
it is.
It's 11 now, but give it a year, it'll be 1,000, right?
Give it a year, it might be 50.
That's how these things work. It goes from 11 to 1,000 in a year once the word of mouth
Yeah,
happens.
Oh,
it's
if
like Spinal
only.
Tap.
Um,
So what was the biggest challenge for you then, apart from the actual physical learning someone else's code? What made this game more like interesting or ambitious in your opinion?
Well, the learning the code was probably 90% of the challenge, but
Yeah.
my last game, Aluna and Bree, when I tried to do that open world stuff, I went, all right, we're going to have a city you can explore. There's all these places you can go to. So there's like a town, there's 6 districts, you've got a dungeon, which have new dungeons that open up over time. But the problem I had was that it was a little bit overwhelming at the start. And I went, okay, rather than just throwing people into the deep end without like a ton of tutorials, I decided to make a much smaller world map initially. So instead of like having access to everything, it's just the first island. It's more of a linear journey. You go from one island to the next. So each island is a different dungeon. The first one's the reused island from Aluna and Bree, but the second one you go to Obsidian Peak, which is like a cat girl Christmas town that's going to have Santa later. You then go to the woods, like the fairy forest. You then go to a battlefield, and then you go to this big theme park and have a big fight there. And just by limiting the scope to one at a time, I'm like, all right, these characters live here, and I can, in chapter 2, you get these new things. Chapter 3, you get this. It just structured it, I felt, in a much better way, and it seems people prefer that approach. So yeah, sometimes just throwing people in the deep end might work for Elden Ring, but when you're an indie RPG, sometimes it doesn't hurt to have a stricter focus, I guess. Yeah, that's probably the biggest difference between the 2 games, and I felt it's made a huge thing. That and that to update the UI to make everything more readable and little chibis to show where people are and who you can talk to during each time period. Yeah, there's a stricter time limit as well. I gave people too much time. I went, okay, in Persona, you often run out of time and can't hang out with everyone. And I went, let's give them a bunch of time in Aluna and Bree to hang out with all the different social link / heartbeat events. But most people knocked it over by about chapter 3, and by chapter 4 and 5, they'd run out of stuff to do. People were much savvier with abusing in-game systems than I thought. So yeah, I decided to overwhelm people by throwing in half as much time and twice as many characters, so you can probably only see 80% of it realistically. The time abusers will find a way to see everyone, but yeah, just tighter, just more focused, which I think is, as an indie developer, it's very easy to just keep adding and adding without scaling back and bringing things in. Yeah, it's a learning process.
Well,
I'm getting better.
You said that you added Australian voices to
Yeah.
kind of double down, I guess, on the Australianness of it. Do you get feedback that across all your games that is kind of a quality that people kind of appreciate, or is it kind of something that they gloss over? Like,
Oh,
does it matter to players that this is very Australian?
it's more over time it's being picked up. In the first couple of games, I was a bit nervous and I didn't want to lean into stereotypes, but I've been leaning into it more and more. I've got some feedback on people being surprised by the accents in this game, for example.
Mhm.
And it's something I want to do even more with going forward. I'm working on another visual novel that I aim to release later in the year. Help, I'm turning into a mermaid. And the plan for that is
Like
I'm going.
the Phil Jennings, the Round the Twist. Sorry, not Phil Jennings. What's his name? Paul
Oh, I
Jennings.
can't. Yes, yeah. I don't
Yeah.
remember that particular one. I remember the spinning willy.
Oh, everyone
So
remembers a Spinning Willy.
we
That's a
all remember
classic
that one.
story.
The
Yeah.
horrifying fox.
God.
But yeah, I plan to get to. I'm hopefully going to work with 10 or so Australian voice actors, and I think it's going to completely gobsmack a few people going, "Oh, this is Australian." Because the Australian voice acting scene, you don't hear a lot about it, but there is probably a few dozen people working in it, and yeah, it's like, oh, these people need more exposure. We need more Aussies in these games. So yeah, hopefully the Australianness becomes more and more apparent over time. Um, I mean, people like Persona because it's a simulation of Australian life. Why not a simulation of Australia with, as Matt said, big booby anime girls?
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
just it's such a odd mix that it has that very anime aesthetic and then the very Australian
Mm.
mannerisms and characterization stuff. Have you ever?
Early on, yeah. I was going to say early on, I tried to mix elements of Tokyo and Sydney into my main city, Axon City. That was what it was meant to be. And so I was like, oh, here, artist, here's a picture of like Akihabara, here's downtown Sydney, here's a Sydney train station. It didn't really come across super strong, but so I've gone less Japan and more just lean into the Australianness over time because it's
Have
more
you
fun.
ever? Have you ever been tempted to like move the kind of the art style away from the anime style to, I guess, for want of a better term, I guess a more Western style to kind of match that kind of aesthetic up with the Australian quality?
I think the contrast is what works in its favor. Also, I've done the incredibly lazy slash clever system of recycling all of my art assets throughout the games. So characters from Max's Big Bust 1 are still showing up in this newest game. I've tried to keep the art style consistent, so while a few of them aren't drawn as well as later characters, it's like, oh yeah, and people love the returning characters. So it's how I'm able to keep releasing games instead of starting from scratch. I'm only adding on, say, 20% new assets, so I can keep using existing characters. All the major characters will get new sprites and new outfits and new animations and things, but a lot of the older side characters are just coming back. They've maybe got an outfit that I'd saved for a future game that they'll wear. Um, at the end of the day, I'm just a solo developer. I still have a full-time job working at a local uni, so I can't like start from scratch.
Mm.
Yeah, be interested to see what an Australian like art style would be though, for this style of game, because there's not a
It's just that
ton
sort
that
of
I've
like
seen online.
washed out sort of palette with
Mm.
like a Round the Twist or like Parallax style children's TV show vibe.
No,
Oh yeah.
it's
It's
gonna
like
be
real
it's gonna
kids.
be Blinky Bill with big boobs, dude.
Oh, blinky tits.
Blinky tits.
uh,
That traffic
I'm not going to
lights.
be able to sleep now.
Yeah, that's an image.
Get that out of my brain.
It's the magic pudding, but like fucked.
Oh no. No, I
Yeah,
think I'll stick to anime.
it's fair enough. I want to see a life simulator or like a modern like living simulator set in Adelaide where the main area you go to is the Moles Bowls. That's that's my
Yeah, but
end goal in life is to
the
have that happen.
the problem is, Alan, when you do a visual novel or whatever, you need to have kind of like 5 or 6 iconic it's areas to explore,
Adelaide has
and
one.
Adelaide has one. You got a shopping
Even
mall.
when it's shit.
You go shopping mall, and then you maybe get to do a trip to Glenelg or something, and that's it. You've tapped out Adelaide. Then
You know, no,
it's
but
not
why would you want
enough.
to go to Glenelg? That's like not even available in the game at this point. It's a shit time.
There's just not enough content in Adelaide to make a game, unfortunately.
There's not enough content in Adelaide, full stop. What a place to live. I recommend living there. Maybe.
I tell you what, it's constantly kind of impressive to me how many Australians are actually out there making visual novels that are. I mean, yours is obviously Australian, and you can't you can't play it without realizing that. But I mean, there are games that I've played that Australians have created that I wouldn't have known are Australian were it not for the fact that somebody told me. Like last year, there was a visual novel called Corpse Factory that was
Is that
released.
Australian?
Yeah, it's Australian. I
Yeah.
didn't even know until I was researching it for a review, and I was like, hang on, this developer's from Melbourne. Interesting. Um, but yeah, it's amazing how many Australians are out there um, creating
I
these
wish I
kinds of
didn't live
games.
in New South Wales. I'll say
Honestly,
that.
when I think about Australian game design now, I'm actually genuinely excited. And at least in Victoria, there's the whole like Victorian arts grant that they're giving out a lot, which is lovely to see as well. I'm hoping, fingers crossed, that the rest of Australia takes onto that because there's a lot of very creative people. Like even last week, I think it was a couple of weeks ago, Frog Detective 3 launched. And that's been doing very well
Mm.
from what I've heard. And that's extremely Australian in just being weird little guys. And then, of course, you got the most anticipated game of all time, Silk Song, which does not exist and will never exist. But
What's going
it's
on there?
exciting because the fact that like developers such as yourself, Lachlan, are able to like do pretty well on a global stage with limited support from any arts or government based groups is fantastic. It's genuinely
Mm.
really exciting, and it's a big testament to the creativity of Australian creators and to yourself, obviously. So yeah, it's exciting. Hell yeah.
Yeah, there's more of us. I'm in rural New South Wales, so I'm in Armidale, middle of nowhere. So I don't get any government grants.
You're
Unfortunately, I don't
like
do
only like
small trade.
100 kilometers away from me. You know that. I'm in Tamworth.
Oh, nice, nice. Just a hot version of Armidale.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah, but even there's a Coffs Harbour's a close town, and I didn't go last year, but they had a
Oh,
big
Cloths.
Nexus Con, very small little convention. That took the first one I went to was in like the local school's basketball court. But there was a couple of people. There was a few that had retired from Chrome Studios and had done some stuff with Epic Games, and they were doing like a little indie game jams up there. So there's more people around than you realize. And that's just within like 100 kilometers of where I am. Yeah, well,
Yeah.
200. Coffs is a bit further, but still. Yeah.
It's really exciting, and the
Mm,
more that we see Australians on the grander stage, the more people will realize, oh wait, it's actually worth investing in this because there are
yep.
some really cool things happening.
I must admit,
Yeah.
It's very
the
nice.
what I think I would like to see for Australia is more of a identity for our games kind of coming through that people can kind of more easily point to a game and say, hey, that's an Australian game without having to be told, if that makes sense. I mean, everybody knows the Japanese game industry, and they play Japanese games, and that comes through quite strongly. Other than that, though, you've kind of everything else is just kind of this big mesh of it's a game, and I would like more games like what you're producing, Lachlan, that are identifiably Australian. That this is a game that only Australians could make, if that makes sense.
Yeah, looking at Corpse Factory now, it looks gorgeous, but they've set it in Tokyo. Like that could have been Sydney.
Well, that's exactly the thing. Like that game could have been an Australian story easily. Instead,
It was set in Adelaide.
it could have been set in
Yeah.
Adelaide. Um, it could have been an Australian game. They could have just there's nothing about it that says it has to be set in Japan. It's just that's what they've done, and I'm not criticizing them for whatever reason they've decided to do that. It's an excellent game. I highly recommend everybody play it. It's a little
Yeah,
bit
I might pick it
a little
up.
bit dark and
Looks good.
subversive, but it is a very smart game. It's very well written, and it's very much worth playing. But yeah, it could have been an Australian game, and um, you know. There was the back when we had a large game development industry, we did have that Tales of the Borderlands game. Oh, sorry, the Borderlands game that was set on the moon and was aggressively Australian as well.
Oh,
The
yeah.
pre-sequel.
Yeah, and
Very Australian game.
I'm
Better than
not.
two.
I'm not a big fan of Borderlands, but I did appreciate the fact that they actually made an Australian game. I would like to see more games that kind of have, this is developed in Australia by Australians and is in some way reflective of Australian culture. I think that would be important for us as the industry goes along.
I'm waiting for a Pokemon game set in Australia. Does
Well,
it make sense?
actually, there was one other Australian game that was released this year that was very aggressively Australian, and that was called Dinkum, which is basically Animal Crossing,
Yes.
Animal Crossing, but set in Australia, which was
Oh, I
great.
saw that.
Yeah, absolutely great. I love that. It came out of nowhere. The developer was. It took me ages to confirm that he was Australian, but he is, and yeah, it's just nice having that. It's a contrast. That it's not just another Animal Crossing like game. It's a reflection on our culture. So more of those kinds of things
Yeah,
would be good.
I want a version of Picnic at Hanging Rock as a video game. Just go down the line of like classic Australian tales. The castle, we can adapt that into a video game.
Well, what I want to know is why haven't like big game developers like Rockstar or something like that, like, came in and just done shit with Dead Kelly or something like that. Thunderbolts Rock, those sort of things.
We
It
had
actually does surprise me that we've not done more with Country Australia because it's like the Wild West kind of.
because they Forza Horizon 3 was set in Australia. That was a big AAA
It was
investment in
sick.
there. And that was the best one by far. But maybe I'm just
Yeah.
biased.
I mean, it was
think
just cool to like drive around Country Australia and be like, yeah.
I mean, I think part of it is like I think you've kind of tapped into that with your voice actors. For Australian games to be identifiably Australian, we do need to have that voice accuracy as well, where the characters are therefore accented
Yeah, I was
as
going to say,
Australians.
I'm trying to get a diverse cast, but that Australian, like that twang that you just can't get away from, that's always there. And yeah, I spoke to I spoke to Amy Smith, who's very prolific. Recommend her as a podcast guest if you can get her. But yeah, sent me a bunch of Australians, and it was really difficult to narrow down the list. There was a handful. I was like, I'm only voicing 4 characters here. I desperately want to hire everyone here because there's some really talented Australians that just aren't getting any coverage. So while I doubt they'll get it from one of my games, I think it's gonna add a lot to my games once I can get more people on board. That's what I'm most excited for 2023 is working with voice actors, reading some of my ridiculous dialogue, which is going to be a bit surreal, but I'm going to have to edit it more than once. More proofreading required. Because I proofread my stuff, but not as much as like a professional editor. So I'm going to have to be careful because, yeah, I don't want someone saying sentence that makes no sense and things. But yeah,
If it's any
just
consolation, I'm a teacher and I still do that when I teach my kids sometimes.
yeah.
There'll be moments where I read something, I'm like, oh, that's like not a good sentence. I have to reword this on the spot.
Yeah. Oh, it's easy to just fall into the habit of writing something funny without really realizing that if you said this out loud, it would just be a word salad
Yeah.
nightmare. Yeah.
It's the joy of creating. Just
Mm.
realizing that halfway through, like, oh wow, this like is insane. This is an insane person.
Yep. Pretty
I
much.
love that. So what's the plan for your next experiment there? So you're talking about making another visual novel. Is there any hints about what that may be?
Yeah, so I'll give a few hints. I've got to finish this RPG first, but I
Yes.
did probably 70% of the work back in 2020, over the past couple of years while figuring out the engine. So most of it's done. I'm just finishing up the story and polishing and all of that. So that it should be done in the next couple of months. Next visual novel I want to do is another Australian RPG about a guy that turns into a mermaid gradually over time. Hence, help, I'm turning into a mermaid. I did at one point make a non-gender bender themed game with a Luna and Brie, but it didn't do super well. So I'm going to stick to my strengths for the time being, and just do another one similar to Max's Big Bust, because it seems to be what people enjoy. Yeah, it's going to be the same sort of thing I did with Max's Big Bust, except it's going to be mermaids. It's going to be exploring old ruins like Atlantis. It's all in a big underwater area. The whole main city you're in gets sucked into a magical dimension, so it's still the same Australian stuff, but in a different context. Because
So
there's an old,
basically Avatar 2.
yeah. Did you ever? There's an old show called Danny Phantom on Nickelodeon.
There you go.
Yeah, and at one point their whole town gets sucked into the ghost zone, and like it's the same town, but outside of this big bubble is all the spooky ghost stuff, and it's that sort of same thing, but with spooky Cthulhu underwater stuff.
So WandaVision.
Yes, except outside is spooky. Yeah, rather than stuff. Yeah, and lots of silly aquatic stuff. I'm going to be parodying the Australian. It might all be to do with mining. So there's going to be some of the Australian stuff, like that whole Scott Morrison coal speech. I'll be lampooning that with voice acting, which will be funny. I'm leaning more into parodying Australian politics. I may have a mayor character called Barnaby Panderai, who might be mocking my local member just a tad, which Trent may be aware of. So there's plenty of material there to make fun of.
Well, I was going to say, I mean,
Trent.
Australian politics is pretty self-evidently funny. So
Yeah. Well, do you have an onion guy? You need an onion guy.
Onion
Oh,
guy?
yeah, get an
I need
onion.
to catch up on it. I'm out of the loop on that one.
No, onion guy
Tony
is
Abbott.
that's Tony Abbott.
Oh yes, duh, of course. Yep, no, that's easy.
Yeah,
Budgie smugglers.
Yeah,
I had a
that's
budgie
great.
smuggler joke in the last game. That was the name of one of the swimwear shops.
that's very good. I'm on board with that.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's really
Nothing
exciting.
too political, just a little bit of parody here and there, a bit of fun.
Just a little bit of like,
Yeah.
What would
Like
be
the
great is
finger
like
pointing.
a game which like takes Australian euphemisms and other stuff, but like from like an outside perspective, which doesn't like budgie smugglers. It's like a shop, but they're actually smuggling budgies, like stuff like that.
I got I asked the artist to draw a budgie in a pair of Speedos, and the response, like for the logo, because that's all I have, and this Japanese artist was like, I found this very distressing to draw. I'm like, what? But machine translations back and forth, like you use the free translations. It could have meant something else, but yeah. They were very, very confused by that request.
Yeah, it is one of those things where it's hard to explain that without having grown up around it.
Yeah.
There's a world out there where instead of saying like alakazam and like that sort of thing, it was just Australian slang words, and I love that idea a lot.
Oh, I have to
Like just going out there instead of like saying like the traditional like magic words, it's just like, oh, dingo.
Yeah.
Just aggressively like Australian stuff. Yeah, I'm here for that.
I have had to dial back swearing. My last game, Max's Big Bus 2, got in a bit of trouble with Steam censors for having too much swearing. I kind of may have used the good old C word to describe a friendly interaction with people.
But that's just Australian.
Oh, I know, but apparently that got me a XXX adults only rating, which is baffling to me because Cyberpunk has got first person sex scenes and customizable genitalia, but Max's Big Bus 2 has...
You can literally pick your dick.
Yeah, and I said the word dick, and there's apparently someone commenting on having a dick. I had a dick joke at the start. Admittedly, they had giant anime boobs, and that was the joke, but had a bit of everything. But I wasn't allowed to have that, and I've got a XXX rating, and you have to log into Steam to see Max's Big Bus 2. So I am dialing back my swearing a little bit, which is disappointing. But
it's so it is so frustrating. Like I don't know what it is about Steam, whether it is the anime thing, whether it's a thing about indie developers or where it comes from. But the inconsistencies and the what it feels like the specific targeting of kind of these small scale indie visual novel projects. Like there's another developer, Ebi Himes, who created Sweetest Monster, and Sweetest Monster is a very, very good game. It got released on Steam Fine. It has actual, it has full sex scenes and everything, and it was fine. Then she went around and produced Sweetest Monster 2, or whatever the sequel's called, and it doesn't have any of that stuff. It's much like the content is much less um, extreme than the first Sweetest Monster, and it got banned from Steam.
Oh, completely
To
banned.
Yeah, completely banned from Steam to her
Wow.
complete confusion. And it's not just the small guys too. There was also the really famous example of last year of Chaos Head getting banned until the
Was that
entire
banned?
until the entire fan base of Spike Chunsoft got up in arms, and then Steam paid attention and reversed it. But it is crazy how this stuff gets hit by censorship when, like you say, Cyberpunk has sex scenes and full on frontal nudity and all that stuff, and that gets waved through. And you've
Yeah.
got extreme horror games on Steam, like
Last two, where you can see a dick get
Agony
cut off
or
by a bloody thing.
Wow.
Succubus, which was that Polish game, which is about a trip through hell as a succubus, and it goes places and it gets waved through. And these things are crazy. There does seem to be a specific vendetta against visual novels for some reason, and it's
Because
I
all
don't
I've
know.
got is characters in swimsuits and characters in their underwear occasionally. Like there's no nudity, and I thought I'd be okay because all of my characters are in their like mid-20s, early 30s. Like there's no one in high school.
Yeah, it's
There's
not
like
like you've got the school
one.
uniform going on or anything like
No,
that.
none of that. They're police officers half the time. Like yeah, but apparently that crosses a line. But that's why I was a bit careful with this Robotic Battle Maiden game. I made sure there wasn't any panty shots on the title. I had to crop that out, which was a bit of a shame because it was a nice bit of artwork. But I went, I better not push it. Better play it safe. Disappointing, but I will find ways to work within my new self-imposed limitations. And apparently, Steam is easing up a little bit, but it's just so inconsistent. Like witches allowed to have sex scenes, but some games are not allowed to have swimsuit. I don't. But hyperviolence is fine. Is it an American thing? I just don't really get it.
Yeah, it's an American thing, 100%.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Um,
imagine it's basically Steam deciding what's going to get us in trouble with the moral police. And that just happens to.
LGBT themes might work against me as well because I've got quite a few
I
same-sex
was going to
couples in
say
there.
maybe the gender bender thing actually
Yeah, gender bending.
might actually be factoring against you too,
Mm.
because
But
that's
I get a
certainly a thing.
surprising number of sales from Russia and things and places where it's illegal to play games like this. They're still buying it. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean that's I'm certainly like we've chatted kind of offline, or not not in public, but my visual novels are not even going to bother slipping into Steam because I just know that they're not going to
It's still worth
fly.
giving it a go. You get a lot of exposure. Like itch.io is a great website, but exposure dies off very quick, whereas Steam's got quite a lot more
Yeah, no,
long term.
I'll look at other platforms like Deal Site and stuff where
Oh yeah, that might be good.
for indie games. And yeah,
Yeah, I'll chat with you more offline because I've dealt with a couple of people, got mixed feelings on a few, so I'll send you some messages. We can give you
there
some
is, I
release
mean,
advice.
the one that I'm producing, that I'm doing a dance sport one. If I can get around to finally getting it done, it'll probably take me a year or two. But that one will be fine for Steam. There's nothing in that one at all. So yeah, that'll probably be
Damn,
the
I'm
first.
disappointed. I want a risque sports dance sports game, Matt. You're letting me down.
No,
Can't they
it's
go to
going.
like a Hooters or a stripper bar at some point? Like a DLC chapter?
I mean, these things are always tempting. It's always tempting to produce an itch.io version, which is just not like nobody's wearing clothes anywhere. Like you can get away with that on itch.
Mm.
But yes, Steam's the way Steam treats visual novels is it definitely annoys me a great deal.
Yeah. You can't complain too much. I mean, it's still most of your sales are going to be on Steam and you do get visibility. I just wish there was more clarity around their rules.
Yeah, that's the
Um,
thing.
It's fair enough.
yeah, I mean, if they say you can't have this, I go, sure. What do I need to change? It's just the not good enough, and you see other people skate by and games. Some of them have the R18 patches, and you're like, mine are just in swimsuits. I mean, they've got giant boobs, but they're in swimsuits. Yeah, it's just it's disappointing, and just unclear. So I'm going to try and avoid the triple X rating in the future. But for all I know, Max 2 did quite well. It's my best-selling new release game, which was fantastic for me. Meant I could actually get a computer. So maybe it got more sales. I have seen a few angry comments to people angry that it's not got any sex scenes in it. But I'm like, I never said it did. If you read the adult content description, it says
Steam
there's no
Steam
adult
said it
content.
did.
Yeah,
People are mad because
yeah,
Steam
it's a
promised them
valid
something.
refund reason, but they won't remove it. Yeah. Yeah, the developers describe the adult content like this. There is no graphic nudity or sexual content in this game, and yet still they're frustrated. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right.
But you never know,
Well,
Isn't
maybe
it
I've
fun?
won over some people.
well,
Looking
best
for a
of,
porn game. Went, oh, yep.
best of luck with it. I hope I hope this new one is successful for you, and you can continue to produce them. And yeah, hopefully you've got many more in in the pipeline in the future
That's
as
the
well.
plan.
As long
Yeah.
as you can keep making them, I guess that's the main thing, isn't it?
Yeah, and thanks for having me on the podcast. It's always
No,
fun to come on this.
It's great to have you on as always.
Absolutely.
And thanks, Alan and Trent, as always, for being excellent hosts. And it's good to be back. It's good to be hitting
Yeah.
2023 nice and
Yeah.
hard, and it's already busy. So yeah, should be a good year for everyone.